Welcome, gentlemen, Rainier and William, to the archive. And today we are so for people who have followed long enough, know that there's been some extensive coverage on Norse history and some of Nordic language. Done a couple of interviews with Scott on runes. But today we're going to take a whole break from all of that nonsense and we're just going to talk pure and utterly about Viking Age weapons and warfare. Um, so, gentlemen, impressively, the both of you don't just study the weapons, and historically, you're also involved with doing some testing as well, some hands-on experiments which I found the most impressive, to be honest, that you
Thank you.
guys were studying extensively in the field as well with the actual weapons themselves or recreations of these weapons. So let's begin. Just let us know a little bit about yourself, each of yourselves, and then fill us in on why you started doing all of this.
All right, I'll start. I'm William Short. I'm the manager of Hurstwic. Hurstwic is an organization that scientifically researches the Vikings with a focus on Viking combat. That is our specialty, but we're interested in all things Viking. And my interest in all of this started more than 25 years ago. This was not my background. This is not my education, nothing like that. But I heard that there were these things called sagas, these stories about Viking Age Iceland. And I read one, I liked it. I read a few more, I really liked it, and I wanted to learn more. So I took a summer course at the University of Iceland. And I fell in love with the place, with the topic, and eventually quit my day job to do Viking research full time.
So I'm Reynir, and this is my helper, Snooder. Probably won't help at all. Yeah, I got into this. So I was training martial art quite dedicatedly before I met William, and then I met William, and he broke something in my brain. I thought, Vikings, is that something of interest? So I have been doing with him this research for 15 years, and yeah. I think it would just be a big case to introduce us because we really don't fit into any category of academic or reenactor or anything like that.
The description I like best is what Raina's sister calls us. You know, because there's no description for us, it really fits. She calls us Viking perverts because of our fascination with the period. And I think that's a good title. We like it.
Okay, a healthy obsession.
Exactly.
All
You know,
right.
if you had to put us into a box, that probably the best box for us would be scientists. You know, we're really focused on using the scientific method to try to understand these people from 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, very unique. And for a group of people where there's so much not written in
Mm-hmm.
terms of from their own perspective, this is kind of where the labs and the archaeology really kicks into high effect and understanding anything and everything we can about them.
Our research method is really to use layer testing. So we just have to take everything. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's the picture sources, if it's the literary sources, if it's the foreign literary sources, if it's the rune stones, if it's the archaeology, and we layer it together. We cross-check it. And whatever theory sort of is supported throughout, and we can pressure test it in like combat. That's the theory we go by. So there is some writing about them, of course, but we have to take everything with it and actually go to their footsteps. So we go to the historic places to check, does this fit what they're describing? So yeah, William.
Yeah, yeah. If I may, suppose we use a specific example because that might help explain it to the people who are watching this or listening to this. You know, suppose we wanted to understand how Vikings use a sword. Well, we'd look for every possible source we could. So the first place we'd go to is archaeology. We look at historic swords from the Viking Age. We go to museums, we go to collections, we study them, we measure them, we pick them up. Occasionally, we even have the opportunity to swing them to get a sense for what they do. And we'll go to the literary sources and see what people back 1,000 years ago wrote about how these swords were used. And we'll read these ancient texts in the original language. We think that's really important because the translator may have not understood the weapons and how the weapons were used. So we want to go back to the original language, and sometimes we'll even go back to the original manuscripts just in case the editor who compiled the manuscript into an edition made some errors, because sometimes that even happens. So we'll go really deep. We'll go back to the swords. We'll make critical measurements of the swords. We'll do 3D scanning of the sword so we can create computer models. We'll put those models into finite element analyses packages so that we can really understand the capabilities of the swords. We've done motion capture of fighters using these weapons, actually swinging the weapons, so we know how the body moves, how the body puts energy into the weapon, and how that weapon puts energy, this destructive energy, into the target. We'll create physical models of the weapons so we understand what are the important parameters of the weapons, what really matters. And then we'll go into the lab and make measurements, actual cutting measurements with measuring the power, the energy that the weapon puts in the target. We'll do cutting tests where we'll use replica sharp weapons against targets to see how they perform. And our target of choice is animal carcasses. They are closer than anything we know of. Many of the targets commonly used, we feel are not adequate for our testing. So an animal carcass is the target of choice for this testing. And to see if the weapon cuts the way we expect, to see if it creates the energy, creates the wounds and the wounds and the injuries that we read about in the literary sources, and to see if it creates the marks on the skeletal structure of the animal that we see in the skeletal remains of people from the Viking Age. And then the final test is sort of force on force simulated combat. We go into our research lab or training room and really try these things. Obviously, we can't do real combat. Ethically and legally, we are sort of prevented from doing those kinds of tests, but we get as close as we possibly can. And here's one of the areas where I think Hurstwic has really gone a long way, and a lot of this is due to Rainer's ideas on training.
Yeah, it is simply this. We made a list. It's somewhere on our website called "Traps and Pitfalls of the sort of Modern Mindset." So what we moderners uh, will be polluted by when we research the people of the past. And one of them is the idea of modern efficiency. So an easy way to figure out how Vikings would have fought with a sword is just, I have a sword, you have a sword, how would we most efficiently use it? But that may have nothing to do with how Vikings did it. Another is modern constraints. And we have to realize that we are, in fact, not Vikings, even though me and William look damn sexy with the long hair and beard and so on. Well, it's debatable, but we're not 1,000-year-old people. So whatever test we do will never fully replicate what Vikings did. So we have to test it in a billion ways to come to the conclusion, because we are, like you told, even though we're not ethical and not always legal, there are limits. There are limits, like a dismembered training partner is sort of frowned upon. So,
Yeah, I heard that's a little inconvenient. Um, so have you guys had so far like a favorite recreation in terms of weapon or wounds from myths or sources that you've done?
Okay, that's a little bit different question, Garrett, and I'll try to answer that because one of the things that makes our research so exciting is that it's so adventuresome. We try a lot of things that are strange and bizarre and maybe even a bit, off the wall, but we're curious. We want to know. There's a couple of favorites that come to mind. And Rainer, please interrupt if I'm not explaining it well. But one of my favorites, can someone who is wearing a male shirt swim? Because the literary sources like the sagas make it sort of unclear that many people could not, some may be able to. So in a naval battle, it was very common that people would jump overboard while wearing mail or fall overboard while wearing mail. So we wanted to find out. So we put someone in a male shirt and asked them to jump into the water and see if they could swim, see if they could rise from the bottom, and so on. And Rainer was the first guinea pig. And the pictures are actually sort of funny. We wanted to make it at least semi-safe. And so we tied this like, little tiny string onto his back, as if that was going to keep him from drowning if we had to pull him up. But as it turned out, some people could swim with no problem at all wearing mail. Others just sank to the bottom.
No, I love that experiment as well. So I'll choose a different one. Probably dueling in a tub. It happens in one of the literary sources as well, that where two men duel, but in a tub, sort of the size of a what do you call it, skier tub, or whatever skier, the translation of skier is, food tub, and it is the most nonsensical thing in the universe. I mean, it's really good for hugging a person or kissing them, but for swinging a weapon, it's just impossible.
Yeah.
So, but we put a lot of effort into trying it, even as nonsensical as it was.
So let me explain a little bit more. Dairy products in the Viking Age were stored in these wooden tubs in the longhouse that were mostly set into the earth to keep them cool. So that would keep the dairy product cool so it would survive throughout the winter. And these tubs are enormous. So a man can stand up in them, but they're not very wide. And what the literary sources suggest is that two men would be put into this tub, for lack of a better term, and a top put on, and only one would come out. And so we wanted to try it. So we made something that simulated this. We lowered it over the two fighters and said go, and they started whacking at each other with the practice weapons, and it was just crazy. That was uh, uh, as Rainer says, it was good for kissing, but not very good for fighting, just because it was so close. You couldn't even swing. There's no way to defend. There wasn't even any way to attack.
Uh, that was one of my favorites. Of course, they had millions in this time period, but I really like that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I really like that. That's a different aside for the Vikings because you're always hearing about in terms of media these like very heroic and exciting duels and battles, but you don't ever hear about these silly situations, kind of the best way to put it. I mean, I can imagine a duel in a really tight space and you're like waist deep or however deep in dairy, which is a bit hard to probably move around in, and you're expected to kill someone else. I mean, I can only imagine how terrifying and crazy of a situation that is, but recreating it, I can only imagine if anyone was going to die, it was probably through laughter.
It was mostly. I would assume if this duel actually happened like this, the first sort of emotion we get is just look at the person and think, "What are we doing? Why like this?" I mean, Viking duel in general is a really bizarre uh, action, but this took it even to another level.
That's another area that we did a lot of research on, is trying to figure out Viking duels. It's a key aspect to what it means to be a Viking, is to be a dueler. and many, many, many examples and in the literary sources. And when the literary sources talk about it, they say that one of the aspects of the duel is reciting the dueling laws. The problem is those laws have not been preserved and they're not recorded in the literary sources. So we spent a lot of time trying to figure out what these duels were actually like. And they're pretty bizarre. And when we try them in our training room and in our research lab, we try to replicate them as closely as we can. They're bizarre beyond belief, but it tests very deeply everything that it means to be a Viking, all in this tiny space. So the duels are stationary. The two fighters cannot move, and the literary sources say not even an inch. So that is bizarre to try to fight from a stationary position. And then number two, it's very tight quarters. They have to stay within a confined space. And then the third one is it's turn based. So if Rainer challenges me, I get to take the first swing at him and he can only defend it. Then it's his turn to strike to me and I can only defend it. And it just goes back and forth and back and forth. So that is truly bizarre, to stand there and look at your opponent knowing that he is preparing to slice you in two and trying to figure out what you're going to do to stop it. And then there's the even more bizarre thing. Some of the duels, you didn't hold your own shield. The weapons were almost always sword and shield. And in some cases, at least, people did not hold their own shields when they dueled, but they had a shield holder to provide the defense during the duel. So that's adds yet another complication. It's truly bizarre. Rainer, what did I miss?
Right? You captured it all. It's
Yeah,
just bizarre.
Yeah.
yeah.
So was there anything culturally, because you said it basically kind of meant to be a Viking was to do these duels. Is there anything culturally you guys have uncovered, or is there anything documented that states as to why it was so important?
So I'm going to throw out a guess, and maybe nonsensical or not. Uh, we're
Educated
talking.
guesses are always welcome.
Okay. So we're talking about the term Vikingur, not the sort of generic term Viking, but the term Vikingur, which is usually associated with those who go raiding, like a Viking was a raider. Uh, the literary sources suggest that it was both for those who raided and those who dueled. And we can even see it in the law codes that it is so similar we barely can see the difference. Now, dueling was usually not this nonsensical idea we have of chivalry or something, but it was mostly just somebody came to your home, said, "You know what? I like your wife. Should I take her, or do you want to duel?" And and you could see the same with the raiders. They come, knock on your door, and sort of expecting a fight, but take whatever they want. So there is a lot of similarities. The dueling practices of Vikings is just really tainted by modern mindset, how we think it should have been done. But if we read the source material about it, no, it's not. It could be done for many reasons, but by far the reason is somebody wanted something in your home.
Wow, it's got a lot of parallels with Shogun era Japan once all the samurai started to get banned.
Mm.
A duel. Most of the time it would be to get a job, but still that mindset of people going to each other's houses and being like, "I want this. How about let's duel to
Mm.
the death over it?"
Yeah.
And you can even see it sometimes in we were talking about the similarity between raiding and dueling. You can sometimes see this in the piracy aspect when they take over another ship. They often offer the ship the opportunity. Do you want to fight, or do you want to give up everything and we just put you on shore with your clothes on? So there is a lot of similarities, but this is only for the concept of Vikingur, not Viking, the generic term.
Okay. So, culturally, so I think a lot of people don't really dive too in depth about this. So what really like? in the period of which the Vikings were alive, what was it really to be a Viking? Like culturally, was this like, oh, okay, you're just the guys that the king has and just to go raid another place? Was this what every man dreamed of growing up to be? Was this the greatest job of ever?
Great. It seemed so. I will blabber, William, and please
Yes.
take over.
Yeah.
So to be a raider, so just be clear on the terms we use. I'll just use raider for the idea of vikingur. To be a raider was the best title in the universe or the worst title in the universe. So I remember when I was researching it, the first time I got really shocked by reading one of the sagas where a young boy killed another boy during a game, and his mother told him, "Well, you will grow up to be a raider, and kill a lot of people." I thought, child services? What is this? Is not normal. But the idea is, if you raid, you go you go from the land, do something heroic, put yourself in danger, come back with riches, or die this heroic death. If, however, somebody raids your own home, then you are the most ghastly thing in this universe. So if a raider is the highest priority title or the lowest priority title, only depends on where they raided.
Huh.
So if you raid overseas and come back with riches or come back with this reputation, orstir, which we should talk a little bit about, then you are the highest of the high. But if you raid your neighbors in your own neighborhood, you are the worst of the worst. So where it happens matters a whole lot. And it seems like everybody rated. That's oversimplifying. That's a generalization, but it's not just the king and his men. It seems like everybody rated, and there's source after source, both from Viking lands, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rainer, but also from non-Viking lands, saying that young men were expected to go out and do something to gain this wealth and gain this reputation, this orstir, whether that be with dueling or raiding or something. This was something a young man was expected to do. So we have, kings rated, farmers rated, everybody in between rated. This was something expected.
This is all right. So this is painting a good picture. Um, so stereotypically, I think this goes back. Oh God, I had when I was talking with uh I can't remember his name, but he wrote The Battle Over America's Origin Story. Dr. Brian Regal. Since I want to say it was the 30s, there's been this media idea that these savage barbarians just love to fight to the death, basically. Um, and Viking death is a sword in hand death, and that's really what it's all about. I just rewatched one of the greatest worst movies of all time, The Vikings, uh, back from the 50s.
Yep. Yeah.
Um, largely entertaining, but largely inaccurate.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it didn't really, I don't know if that was just a result of uneducation, of people not knowing really anything about these people at the time, or in Hollywood, somebody wrote a script and they weren't educated. Um, but there was also like some honor code or system tied to all of this too, as well, that had a religious implement.
You want to do this, Rainer?
There you have at it. I will pick up the pieces.
Thank you. So, Garrett, yes, this this activity was tied to beliefs of these people, and it's worth saying a little bit about this. Havamal is a poem of advice from the Viking Age. It's part of the Poetic Edda, this collection of poems, ancient poems. And one verse in Havamal says that, probably the most often quoted half verse in all of the Norse poetry is that cattle die, kinsmen die, you yourself die. But the one thing that I know never dies is Orstir. And so we spent a lot of time trying to understand what that word Orstir means. The literal meaning is word glory. And what it means is that people remember you and talk about you after you are dead. This was the eternal life for a Viking, and it's what all Vikings aspire to, that people would remember them and talk about them after they're dead. And the way they did this was by doing something memorable. In a Drengur-like way. And so we needed to understand what the word Drengur is. And this was a person, now, probably the best way to describe it is trust infused with honor. This was someone that you could trust. This was someone you wanted standing at your side. This was someone you wanted to be in a fight with. This is someone who would support you, who you could do business with because you knew he wouldn't cheat you, who would tell you if there was a plot against you, the person who would stand with you to the very end, to the death. And so you become you achieve Orstir by doing something that puts your life on the line, and you do it in a Drengur-like way. And most often this involved some sort of combat, some sort of battle, whether that be raiding or dueling. So people were constantly trying to do things that would achieve Orstir. And that also results in, was necessary to understand the mindset of the Viking fighter. We can't really understand Viking combat unless we understand the software that guides their behavior, their mindset, what they believe. And so they would be because they're looking for Orstir for this memory. They don't want to just kill the person. They want to kill the person in such a way that it's talked about. So they might do some slice or some cut that causes the person to end up dead. But what they would much prefer to do is slice him in two with a powerful cut. And again and again and again, we see these power-based attacks in Viking combat. And it makes sense if your goal is less killing the other person and more to achieve Orstir, that people will talk about you. And so understanding that is key to understanding Viking combat. So now you can pick up the pieces.
Yeah, so if I understand the question correctly, absolutely. They had principles, they had a code. It is not clearly and easily defined like we would maybe wish. But it is this aspect of do battle and be a man you can trust. And we can see that even in the runestones, how they make those who died fighting until the very end and did not flee. They like raised them to the highest heights. We even see it in the foreign sources when they write about the Vikings, like yeah, these people did not know how to flee.
They didn't know how to give up. They just continued fighting.
Okay. All right. So no retreat, no surrender. That was the mentality. And try and get the coolest kill of the week.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was just, I mean, nobody wanted to talk about somebody who I don't know, made someone trip over and die that way, or just sliced his neck when nobody was looking. They wanted some grandiose killing,
Some grandiose.
or even grandiose dying. Both were considered good. I mean, we also have to understand that to go to Valhalla, you would have to be a great warrior because Valhalla, because Odin only chose those he needed for his army, and you needed to die a weapon's death. So there's one story that says that I think it's to the Swedes, Odin sometimes appeared To some he gave a victory, to some he gave death, and both were thought to be a really good option. So that's sort of the Viking mentality.
Yeah.
Okay, and they were cool with it either way.
Mm.
Seems that way.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, this is all right. Now are there other aspects of their culture where this was this no retreat, no surrender type thinking remained like back at home? Um,
Yeah,
if
very much so.
okay,
Uh,
like if a
if I
fire,
may, yeah,
okay,
if I may say so, a couple of words. Um, One of the Viking beliefs was predestination, that at the moment of your birth, the time of your death was chosen for you by these some number of supernatural women called the Nordnir. So your day to death was chosen. And if it was your day to die, nothing could save you. But if it was not your day to die, nothing could harm you. So this, I think, really infused the Viking Age people with this boldness and adventuresomeness. Why not go out and try something adventuresome? If it's not your day to die, perhaps this is your day to get Norse theater. And if it is your day to die, you can stay home in bed and you'll still die. So why not just go out and risk it all? And I think that informs us about, for instance, going into battle. It might not be your day to die and you'll succeed and you'll gain Orsted. But if it is your day to die, you can stay home and not do anything and you'll still die. And it also informs us about, in my opinion, some of the travels they did on their Viking ships. The Viking ships are an amazing technological advancement. Their ships were capable of things that other European ships could not do at that time. They had great capability, but man, are they, how shall I put it, a little bit risky to do traveling. So why would anybody step on board a Viking ship knowing that the chances are maybe they wouldn't make it to their destination? Well, it's all this predestination. Maybe it is your day to die and you could stay home and still die, but maybe it's not, and it's an opportunity to gain Orstir.
okay,
Okay. I will add to it. There was
Please.
a small break there in the talking.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, we see this idea all throughout the Viking society, at home and everything. So, an example, the word for ambush is fyrirsát, which means sitting in front of someone. And the method they used was the ambusher would find a place where he knew the ambushee would cross at one point, and there was no hiding in the shadows. There was no jumping from the bushes. There was just, okay, we see each other, and the fight would be from there. And usually the ambusher outnumbered the ambushee, but still there would have to be a fight. It's not like, oh shit, let's run away. There are a few times where we see that a story told of them seeing the ambush and thinking, hell no, I'm not going to cower away from this. So it's just ongoing throughout the community. The hyper masculine and violent games they play, the sports they play, the mothers and fathers telling their children, well, in my day we were like manly. We put ourselves in life danger. Look at you now in front of the oven, in front of the furnace. So it's just a different culture, Garrett. Different culture.
Yeah.
okay, okay. What were some of the games that they played?
Well, the most famous, I assume, is we could see in the movie The Norseman is Knattleikur. Even though it's not depicted really well there, it's more of a murder ball there. It's still the same. It was super aggressive. It's a one-on-one sport, really aggressive, often played on ice, and the we don't see anything about points or scoring or anything, just that one player was stronger, like physically stronger than the other. And we also have the wrestling, glima, That was also really big on power. Who was the stronger fighter? Then we have all the other games that are much less mentioned. Um, we also have like Skövuleikur and all those games.
Yeah.
Then we have Hnefatafl, of course, which is sort of the chess game, military strategy.
Yeah.
Uh, Anyhow, am I missing something?
No, Kanatlaker is really amazing. And it's something that our group has been studying for a long time. And we try to play at least every year. We've missed a few from COVID, but we try to play. And our understanding of the game has shifted quite a bit over the years. Uh, the literary sources don't tell us that people would play, but they don't tell us anything about the rules or the playing equipment or anything else. The analogy I always use is if you were writing a novel, a modern novel, and some of your characters are playing a pickup game of basketball, you wouldn't describe the ball or the court or the hoop or the gameplay or dribbling or any of that stuff, because your audience would understand it. And it's the same with the sagas talking about Kanatlaker. The saga audience understood it, so there's no details. So we really have a unclear idea, but our research has really pushed our understanding into a new area. And team sports were not a thing in the early medieval. There's hardly any examples. And so originally we had assumed that Kanatlaker was a team sport. We had fallen into one of our traps and pitfalls that we talked about briefly at the beginning. We made this assumption that it was a team sport, like things we're familiar with, but the evidence says no, probably not. It was more like a one-on-one sport. So you have two different sides, but each individual pair of players are matched up very carefully. And that's something that comes through again and again in the sources, that the two were matched for power. And if there's someone who is especially strong, he might be matched up against two players from the opposite side. And these pairs, these one-on-one would play against one another. And when the game was over, no one ever says that it was point based or one team scored more goals than the other. They don't even talk about teams. What they do talk about is that this player was very strong against this player. And so it's comparing the strength of the players. And Kanatlaker was a test of strength. And so if someone came to the area, Kanatlaker might be one way to test their strength. The other aspect of it, injuries were not unknown in the game, and in fact seem to have been expected. And it's even mentioned in the law codes that any unintentional injury that you suffer in the game is your own fault, because you can leave the game at any time. So it suggests that injury was a possible outcome for the game.
Okay. Okay. Now this is actually starting to paint a picture that they might have been very individually focused or hyper individually interested culturally. They're very much in the individual and the individual capabilities or the individual expression.
I would agree to that. And William, you'll just have to tell me I'm wrong. You see this again, our specialty is combat. So when you ask me a question, I'll probably answer it with combat. Maybe that right or wrong. So in the large scale combat of Vikings, the focus is on the individual. It's not on the tactic or anything. My personal opinion is their military tactics in large scale battle was not so clever, really. But it was really focused on the individual, how he fights, and that he kills as many people as he can in front of him. So, any thoughts on that, William?
No, I would agree. There's even one example in one of the literary sources where there's a group of people attacking, and the person who is nominally leading this tells the individual, stay together, stay together. I know that you have a dispute to settle with people on the other side, but will succeed by staying together. The norm was that you worked on your own. It was a one-on-one situation, even though it was a mass battle.
Okay. Okay. Now let's get into the juicy bits of battle. Um,
Hmm.
William, so I don't forget it. I remember very specifically you talked about in one interview, the Vikings shot bows from the hip. And so I'm going to start with asking, how do you know that?
So, Garrett, we don't know. So, if I said that, I misspoke. But
I mean,
I
it
will
could
say
have been
this.
before editing.
Yeah, no, 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 no.
Yeah,
I probably did say something like that, or it was edited down. Both of those are possibilities. But what the evidence points to is, I think, what we would call instinctual shooting, pointing from the hip, rather than the Robin Hood style draw that you see in all the Hollywood films and you see in so many places. And the reason for that is the pictorial sources. We have lots and lots and lots of pictures, both uh, picture stones from the Viking Age and pictures in manuscripts from other societies contemporary with the Vikings. And when they illustrate Viking archery, the draw is not up to the face, but it's down lower, almost to the hip. And it's just consistent in all these different pictorial sources. And, we were not the first to see this and not even the first to try it. But when we tried it, our archer said, yep, this works. It does not take long to switch to this instinctual style and not suffer from accuracy problems at all. It just seems to be a really effective way, and it's super quick.
Yeah, it's the trap of again, modern efficiency. How would you shoot the bow versus how did they shoot the bow? So nobody cares how I would shoot a bow in normal life because I'm a crappy shot anyway. But we just look at the sources and what do they tell us? Now, there's a lot of possibility for how should I put it? I wish we had more examples of the pictorial sources, but all the pictorial sources we have examples of paint the same or similar picture. And again, this is not our discovery. It was a Danish painter, quite famous archer called named Lars, that pointed us to this. So we just proof checked it.
Yep. We did our own testing, found that it worked surprisingly well. We have a couple of people in Hurstwic who are skilled archers, and when we describe it, they poo-pooed it. But when we went out to the range and tested it, and it was amazingly effective.
Okay. Now there's a lot of talk about swords and axes when it comes to the Vikings. Um, but were they very bow heavy and practiced a lot of range or utilized a lot of ranged combat?
So it depends on what you call ranged combat. So are they bow heavy? I don't think so. And but then again, archaeology is super difficult with the bow. Uh, we see it mostly in mass battles, in the big battles. Uh, so we don't see it in all the other examples of fighting, and especially in Iceland, it seems like the only people who here shooting anything were Norwegians who moved here at that time because we don't have the wood to shoot it. We have no animal to shoot with a bow, and so on and so forth. Now, projectiles, or what did you say, distant friendly or something? I'm sorry, I can't remember the words exactly, but what they had, uh, what we know they used a lot, I would say probably more than the bow was the spear. The spear is, if you see a battle and there are no spears being thrown, then you would assume this was probably not a Viking battle. The the war god himself, Odin, associated with a spear, and you sort of offer the your opponents to Odin by throwing a spear at them. And they had these throwing spears, these projectiles that had the shaft about the thickness of my thumb, not really big for thrusting, intended for throwing.
The other place where spears were used a lot was in naval battles. Naval battles in the Viking Age were also bizarre. They were more like land battles fought on floating islands. So the two opposing sides would tie their ships together side to side and advance, and the whole battle was fought on the deck of the opposing ships. So as my ship approached Rainer's ship, we would touch bow to bow. Someone would jump over, a whole bunch of people would jump over and attempt to clear the deck using conventional weapons. But there'd still be people behind me after I jumped over who would be using archery, using all kinds of projectiles to try to shoot into the opposing ship. And the idea would be to clear the deck, cut the ship away, and move on to the next ship to try to win the battle. But what we haven't talked about is the king of weapons, the king of Viking weapons. Rainer, do you want to talk about that?
No, but I was going to stop you. I thought, I remember that. No, no, you have at it. You have at it.
Yeah, yeah. So this is something we see again and again and again, that when a battle was imminent, this was the weapon that a Viking ran to. And battle locations would be chosen for based on the availability and usability of this weapon. And this weapon is not shown in museums. Curators don't have exhibits of them. And what it was the stone, throwing stones. So at the battle was about to commence, people would try to find what's called a vihi, which is a desirable battle location, and it had two things. One, it had elevation, so some height, so you could throw things, but it had loose stones that you could pick up and throw. And we know that in naval battles, that before a likely naval battle, the ships would stop on shore and take on a load of rocks for throwing. So this was an extremely important Viking Age weapon, is these rocks.
Wow. Throwing rocks. Did they utilize slings or
There is a reference to it, I think, once or twice
okay.
in the entire sort of genre of sources we have. So if they used them, they didn't use them that much. It was just throwing. The ability of throwing anything was considered really praiseworthy. Physical might and being able to throw something. And yeah, we see that even in the knattleikur, if somebody throws the ball really well, it's a praiseworthy thing.
Okay. Okay, so throwing rocks, one of their
Yeah.
key weapons. And that makes a lot of sense. It's small, you can utilize it. I mean, it's why in the jungles, I know this is a bit of a jump, but all the tribes love using, and it's documented, tribes love using anything that's small. It's very efficient. They love darts.
Mhm.
And yeah, that had always been a large mystery to me, really, until now with Vikings, because it's like if you're going to be in a battle, eventually you're going to have to use something from a distance.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and particularly like with England, they've always been very bow friendly. And so, how do
mhm,
you counter that? Um, and I know as cool as it looks, throwing axes aren't necessarily the thing. I think in the medieval period, axes were made a lot smaller than modern hatchets, if I have that correct.
just a couple of things to add, Garrett. One of the reasons why stones are so effective is they're so plentiful in Viking lands. You're never going to run out of stones, especially if you pick a good location. So You have that advantage. Now, throwing axes is something we have been very curious about. And this is one of those situations where our nerdy approach to research has paid off, looking at the physics of axes as they fly through the air. You realize that throwing an axe is a really bad idea. It's not an effective thrown weapon at all. A spear or a stone is going to be much better for throwing. And the literary sources suggested too that, throwing an axe was sort of a last resort when you had nothing else to throw. So, the common popular belief that Vikings threw their axes all the time is probably in error.
I do love that idea though.
Yeah.
It was a last resort.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to make sure I didn't go out
Yeah.
without anything noteworthy. So I threw my axe and it happened to land.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Now, what were other weapons that they utilized? I mean, obviously, like we're talking the medieval period. There's a lot of interesting weapons being made. So, what did these Vikings use?
The arsenal is not gargantuan. It's a sword, a sax, a shield, a helmet, a chainmail, an axe, one-handed, two-handed, and that's about it. The and I think I will add a few to these because these are weapons that usually nobody talks about or cares about. They had the empty hand fighting, the wrestling. They had the stones throwing, and that is in nearly every battle as well. There's a stone used. And this idea that we have a word for superior battle location based on there being stones there. Then there is the fire. And if you read the foreign sources, they're often mentioned that Vikings came with sword and fire. And so focusing intently on one weapon and try to, or only these weapons we are familiar with, and trying to come up with a battle system based on that. If we skip out the stones, skip out the wrestling, skip out the fire, yeah, it is not the correct image we will get. Am I missing something with it?
No,
No, that's good.
I would just add one more comment. Sax is a short sword that was more typical before the Viking Age and was falling out of favor in the Viking Age. So just to explain that for people unfamiliar with the term. But yeah, sword, spear, axe, one-handed or two-handed were the main weapons, bow and arrow, and then stone and so on. And the defenses, shield, and much less common would be helmet and mail shirt. Um, so the foreign sources, when they talk about Vikings coming to these lands, it's always the same. We see this in multiple cultures. The Vikings came with fire and steel and destroyed everything. So this use of fire has been a great interest to us. And last summer we did a really interesting experiment to understand how Viking Age houses burned and how this battle tactic actually worked. And we did this by building a bunch of houses, instrumenting them, and burning them down to test how the tactic actually worked. And we learned many, many things, but in a nutshell, whatever the literary sources say about this tactic, they are underplaying the brutality and the terror that this tactic must have brought to the people inside the house. It's just horrifying what happens. Basically, in a few minutes, everyone inside is dead in a horrible death.
Yeah. Actually, funny enough, last night, I did a burn pile and it was so hot. I had to move all the smoldering charcoal into the wheelbarrow because last night I was immensely worried about my yard catching on fire.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, it spreads quick. It's a very terrifying thing, and
Yeah,
especially in a period where you're not going to easily have access to a water pump or a fire hose. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
you can't really imagine how scary of a thought that really is.
yeah.
We especially focused on the Icelandic turf house. So their build is a little bit different because they're built from turf, and turf is not easy to ignite. So they set fire to the door. And in the literary sources, they talk about there being a discussion, them letting out women and children, and so on and so forth. So it is a super intense and emotional how it is like this small door between like life and death. And what we're finding as well is they had escape tunnels in the house. So and a tunnel they dug without anybody knowing about it, leading all the way to water with the tools they had available at that time. And that these tunnels exist just shows some insanity with Vikings. Like they were prepared to take this precaution against violence.
Wow. All
And
right.
what's so amazing is these tunnels are so well hidden and the secret so well kept that, in the 20th century and 21st century, we are finding these tunnels for the first time in farms that have existed on the site since the Viking Age.
That's remarkable. That is really wild that it's like it's not really until 1,000 years later people are able
Yeah.
to see that.
Yep.
Um, that kind of makes them the ultimate doomsday preppers in a way.
Mhm.
Like these people really were prepared for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so what were some of these tunnels looking like? What are they? Have you guys been in any of them?
Yeah, we checked one out. Nay, we checked two
Two.
out.
Yeah.
Uh, so there are about, if memory serves me, about 1 meter by 1 meter.
So 1 yard by
So
1 yard, plus or minus. Yeah.
now
So
whatever
tiny.
measurements, uh, but they can range from short tunnels to quite long.
Some of them are
So
surprisingly long.
uh, and it's
And
sort of the sort of the Alcatraz idea where they put like mud in their the sand in their pocket and threw it out when nobody saw. The same idea had to be done there because the tunnel led to running water, so they had to put the dirt in the creek in the running water so nobody would understand that they had actually been digging up. And at least in the sagas, they mentioned that people noticed that the running water had stopped because there was too much dirt there. So they had to explain that away as well. So that we're not finding it until 1,000 years later, I am not surprised. It was like super secret because if somebody knew about your tunnels, they could enter in on you from them.
yeah,
Oh my
yeah,
God. Okay.
yeah. And so the tunnel led from underneath the master's bed out through the ground, usually to someplace where there was running water, either a stream or the sea or a lake, someplace where they could dispose of the tailings.
Oh my God. Wow. This is
Different times.
Yeah.
yeah. I can also picture that these people probably lived in some degree of paranoia from their neighbors having to take that much of a precaution with violence.
Yeah. So then we come and complete the picture, sort of. Now we started in we started talking about orðstír and the word drengur, which we said was a sort of trust-infused honor, who you can trust. And in a violent world, the highest trait is trust. Who do I trust? So if somebody was called a drengur, you know this man you cannot trust. He will not kill you. He will stand by you in ambush. So you just have to hope your friends are praiseworthy or your neighbors are praiseworthy.
Yeah.
And it also, so William mentioned Hawamon before, which is the saying of Odin's. The first verse in Havamál is every door you enter, look around because you never know where danger lies. So this is sort of the paranoia world they lived in, where trust was the highest order, and but be wary. But if I may continue a little bit, because it's also really perplexing, because hospitality was a sacred honor. Somebody knocked on the door, you had to let them in. So you thought, is this person going to kill me or not? I am sort of bound by duty to let him in and make sure he's safe.
So, because travel was difficult in the Viking Age, anyone who was traveling would expect to get hospitality along the route just by literally knocking at a door and saying, hey, let us in. And even the law codes require that under certain circumstances, a traveler must be allowed to enter. And Havamal tells you that you should give him warmth, give him dry clothes, give him food, give him drink, give him a place to sleep. This was essential for traveling in that era where there weren't any, you know, Airbnbs.
Now, I want to just bring it back to the home life just a little bit. In media has helped push this idea that there was shield maidens and these ferocious female warriors, and kind of ironically, in what little I've collected in some of the sagas, like Vinland, um, where we have Freyas, the great psychopath. Um, they're very few and far between, and kind of the women that do fight that are mentioned aren't exactly the most quality of characters. But was there ever like a female warrior unit, or was this a little more traditional and women stayed home?
So I will answer, even though I
Please.
don't want to answer. There's a question this is a question that will be asked always, but I'm not a friend of it. So to me and William, doesn't matter. Does not matter the answer. But sadly, we have to be truthful to history and tell their tale like it was, as best we can. And this question, not your fault, Garrett, but this question in general really smells of zeitgeist, meaning we're painting the picture of the past with the colors of the present. We're looking for ourselves in the past. And if we don't find it, we just look harder to find it. The literary sources, the sagas of Icelanders, they mention women who take up weapons. Barely. They take up weapons. It's not like we have warrior women there. I think in Heimskringla, the stories of the kings, there's only mentioned one of a shield maiden, and that's a man called Skjaldmeyjarson. In the legendary sagas, which have more fantasy element, we have some shield maidens, and in Saxo Grammaticus, we have some shield maidens. But in both cases, these are daughters of kings or earls who decide not to do womanly things, who dress up like a man, and they don't go into battle, but they lead men into battle until they stop doing battle and do womanly thing again. And they just made clear they do womanly thing. Now, the interesting part is there seems to be some uh, gender specificity in this. Thor, when his hammer was stolen, had to dress up like a woman. And that was the worst thing that could have happened to him. In the law codes, it's forbidden to dress like a woman or dress like a man if you're the other sex. So the gender roles seem quite clear. We also have the wound stones. Now, if we look at the memorial wound stones, we see quite a lot of mentioning to violence in one way or another. None of those rune stones are connected to a woman. We also have, and I hate to say this because I hate this question, we also have biomechanics. Now, this is in the age before gunpowder, and Vikings thrived in strength. Some of their weapons can even just depict their love of strength, like the two-handed axe is meant to cleave something in two. Uh, so they were fascinated with strength, and biomechanics tell us that if everything is equal, men are much stronger than women for combat. And so it is difficult to me to say, but I say yes, probably one or two women took up weapons and did well, but mostly no. And I would like to add to that, that doesn't mean today is the same. The martial arts as science has improved dramatically. Training methodology has improved dramatically. Nutrition has improved dramatically. Illegal drugs have improved dramatically. So a woman today can surely beat up a man if she trains. But all things being equal, just sadly, men are stronger. So my guess, at least, I really hope I'm wrong. I really hope we could find it. Just no. We had the Amazons as well, but I don't find them yet.
Okay.
So what do
And
you say with him?
Yeah,
women,
like
yeah. And are there women in your group or women can join your group?
absolutely. Some of our fiercest fighters are women.
Yeah, like I said, today is totally different. I mean, I told you about Glima, the wrestling. Mentioned it barely, but if you come to Iceland and fight, so it's a living tradition. The wrestling is the only sport that survived the Viking Age. But if you came to Iceland and they would challenge Kristin Embla, uh, she would just destroy you, just make you. I mean, she does that to me. I become a floor mat as much as I try to stay upstanding. So we have these fierce creatures, but again, times are different.
Yeah. I mean, overall in history, things are going to be much different. Um, and yeah, one thing that never doesn't really get touched up upon too is the nutrition too that had a huge implement. I mean, when you're looking at a four season area, I'm really glad that I can get up any time of the year and make myself a bowl of fruit for breakfast. But that wouldn't have been the case. You only would have eaten up to a certain point. And if you're lucky, you can do something to maybe preserve your fruit for the rest of the year, or maybe through up until a certain point in the winter. And most likely, you're gonna just live off of bread, maybe some herbs. In the wintertime, that probably could have been a good time to eat some meat, because everything else wouldn't have held. Uh, and I have a historical reenactment cook. I work with a lot, Ali Sabo, and um, she talks about in the modern day with nutrition and food and what's available, the poorest of the poor in 2025 have better nutritional access than people in previous times.
I'll add a little bit more to that, Garrett, because it's an area of intense interest to us and one where we've done some research to try to understand the nutrition and diet of the Viking Age people. Um, so, especially in the northern Viking lands, cereal grains didn't grow. There just wasn't a lot of that. So mostly what they were living on was dairy, dried fish, and preserved meat. We talked about these giant barrels full of dairy product. Well, that dairy product was sour, and the sour dairy product preserved the meat. So they dropped the cooked meat into the sour dairy, and that would preserve it over the winter. So that was where their winter calories were coming from. And looking at what was available to them, their nutrition probably wasn't too terrible. And we see that in the skeletal remains. They don't seem to have a lot of diseases related to nutritional deficiencies. But what they were was they were really close to the edge in getting everything that they needed because they needed huge quantities of calories. Um, I used some software tools to try to estimate how many calories a Viking would need on a typical farm day in spring or fall, which were the busy times. And it was well over 10,000 calories. So that's a lot of food they need to consume.
I think maybe we can start to conclude this. Is there anything either of you would like to cover or give a shout out to that has been talked about yet? Anything you feel like should, now that you have a moment to put a spotlight?
Not for me. No, okay. I'll blabber and William will probably blabber onto whatever I'm saying. So, um, it is Vikings have been fascinating to people since the Viking Age. And we have the Wagnerian, Victorian, and the Lord of the Rings association, the Vikings TV show, the Northmen. It just goes on and on and on and on. And I don't think it will change. And so people will be interested in Vikings and ponder Vikings, and modern medium will probably give some insight into what Vikings were. But I just suggest to people to check out our article on Hurstwic called "Traps and Pitfalls of the Modern Mindset." Then they will see. Then they will start to question things, which is will be really good. Like they will see a duel and say, "Would a Viking fight like this?" Instead of "How does this look?" or "How would I fight?" And so on. There are many, many traps and pitfalls we didn't get into, but I hope they look at it. And yeah, of course, buy our book. Buy our book if you haven't bought our book.
Men of Terror. It's our 20 plus years of research condensed into a book on Viking combat.
Wonderful. I'll pick it up and add that to my book reviews.
Okay.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for taking the time. I
Yep.
appreciate this. People can get a hold of you guys through your website.
Yep. Hurstwic.com.
Okay. Thank
Yeah, or
you.
find us in the phone book or on Facebook or just knock on the door or something. If you have
Knock
any
on the
interesting
door.
question, yeah, we welcome anybody. Or William does at least. I probably won't. But
All right. Thank you again, gentlemen.
All right. Thanks,
there
Garrett.
you go.